I'm in the shower and I get inspired by a thought. I'm like, yes, this is what I'm going to do. This is a great idea. I'm going to get right into it. Or another scenario, I'm sitting listening to someone speaking at an event and they come up with a brilliant idea. And I'm like, whoa, this is amazing. I've got to do this. So, what's the next physical, visible action that I'm going to take? Normally, it's research. I'm going to dive in. How do I do this? How do I get started? What do I do next? How do I become competent at this thing? It's kind of a natural thing now, especially in the information age, with the internet, with all the incredible resources we've got with things like ChatGPT and large language models. We've got all this information at our fingertips. So I go down a rabbit hole. I start learning about the thing. I start getting more information. A week has passed. 2 weeks has passed. Wow, that looks harder than I thought it was. I'll come back to that a little bit later. I'm just procrastinating. I'm not doing the thing that I'm inspired. And in fact, my inspiration has dipped a bit. This is a scenario that has happened to me countless times. And it's a scenario that I encounter other people having as well. So if this is you, if this is something that you've ever experienced, and I can tell you I have experienced that on a number of occasions, then the book that I'm going to review today is for you. Now, before I get to that book, I want to back up and talk about a concept that I've kind of been obsessed with for a very long time. It's this concept of lean. This book here was kind of the turning point in the lean movement. It's called Lean Thinking. And Jeff Bezos actually credits this as one of his favorite books of all time. And so he's based a lot of the decisions he does in Amazon on a lot of the concepts here. But you don't need to read this big, long, thick book to really understand lean. So there's two real main things about lean that you need to understand. Number one, lean is about getting bigger results with less effort. And the second thing it's about is reducing waste. And that's what led me to write this book, Lean Marketing, which is how do we take a lot of these lean concepts, remove waste, get the biggest result for the minimum effort that we possibly can, create a minimum viable marketing system that'll actually get us results. So that's my book, Lean Marketing. And so when I saw this book was coming out, this is the book I'm reviewing today. It's called Lean Learning by Pat Flynn. I was super, super excited because learning a thing has been the most impactful thing in my life. So learning how to learn in a lean manner, in a way where you're not procrastinating for weeks, months, sometimes even years at a time, and often not even getting to the thing that you want to do is super important. So first, I'm going to start with a very common criticism of my own books that I think would be a criticism of this book. And I'll tell you why it's a criticism and why it's not really a criticism. So one of the criticisms of my books is that it's nothing new. It's just common sense advice. And you know what? I would 100% agree with that because, if you read my books, none of this is mind-blowing stuff that nobody's ever thought of that, is, you would say, is something so new and unique and innovative, right? This is common sense stuff in marketing. So the thing is, though, that common sense is not common practice. And a lot of times the details are really the things that make you or break you, the little nuances that are between kind of the main big ideas. And that's very much the case with lean learning. So a lot of the things you'll read in here, you'll feel like, hey, that's just common sense, of course, so that's nothing new or whatever. But the real nuances are in the details. And so Pat's got a lot of details. He talks a lot about his own learning experiences and some of the experiences that he's taken, people that he's mentored and people that he's known in his life. I really, really enjoyed it. They're the books that I love the most where, it seems like it's kind of obvious advice, but, it's once you get into the weeds and once you get into the details that you really see where you're going to really make traction and where it's going to move you to the next level. So for the vast majority of people, their definition of I tried it was I tried it between 0 to maybe 2 times at most. from personal experience, and I kind of alluded to it in the past, that inspiration is highly perishable. I remember Jim Rohn used to say, here's the time to act when the idea is hot and the emotion is strong. And so many times I've had a project flop because I got into this loop of needing to seek out more information, needing to figure it out. And really what's actually going on is fear. It's not that I don't know what to do. It's not that I'm unaware of the next steps or whatever. It's really fear. It's fear of, number one, fear of looking silly in front of other people. And second is fear of failure. And I think here's the thing about fear of failure, why it makes absolutely no sense. People have what's called the spotlight effect. They think that so many people are just looking at them, looking at what they're going to do. And if you fail, all of these people will recognize what a failure you are, how you made mistakes and all of that. Here's the real truth. People will probably not even notice you when you succeed, let alone fail. Like, people are not paying attention to you. People are paying attention to themselves. So I want to start going through this book in a little bit of detail, just give you a bit of a summary of this book. And then I want to give you some of my takes and some of my favorite sections of this book. So the core premise of this book is that, today we've got information overload, and success comes from not learning more, but from actually learning just enough. And so Pat talks about just-in-time learning and just-in-time information. So what's the information that I need to take the next step, the next physical, visible action? Because we've all got information at our fingertips. At any time, we can Google the next step, find the next step on YouTube, reach out to a mentor, read a book, whatever it is. So there's no need to hoard and collect all of this information. That's just a procrastination technique. Instead of information overload, we want selective curiosity. So the true challenge is really just filtering out the noise. And one of the questions that Pat asks is, if this were easy, what would it look like? And he's asking you to look at what's the next visible physical action that you can possibly take to achieve this goal. The next part that I think is really, really powerful in this book, and this is something I've personally experienced in my own life. I've heard this once before from Ryan Holiday, and this is in a section he talks about voluntary force functions. So force functions being things that force you to start working on something. So the section is titled "The Truth About Sharing Your Goals." When it comes to voluntary force functions, most people believe simply announcing their intentions publicly, like on social media, will help keep them accountable and will act as a force function. However, research suggests this approach can backfire. The act of sharing the goal itself made them feel a premature sense of accomplishment, which in turn reduced their motivation in the work required to actually achieve the goal. It's a very, very important point. One of the things that I rarely do now is share my future goals with people. I keep them close to myself for a couple of reasons. So I'll get to that in a moment. But I thought that was interesting. I rarely have seen someone say, don't share your goals, because it actually gives you a feeling of accomplishment and it reduces your motivation to actually do the thing that will get you to your goal. Years ago, I can't remember, I think it was on a podcast or something like that, or maybe in a newsletter, I heard Ryan Holiday say, don't share your plans, don't share your plans with other people. And in my experience, one of three bad things can happen when you share your plans with other people. Number one, you don't know people's motivations. So someone could try and sabotage those plans. Someone could try and stop you. And people do that for a whole host of reasons. Maybe they just like the status quo. Maybe they don't want to see you succeed for whatever reason. Maybe it's jealousy, all of those sorts of things. So that's kind of the nefarious case. And that's probably the least likely. The second thing is, people who care about you can be just discouraging. They can be like, man, that sounds risky. I don't know if that'll work, or that's been done before. Very few ideas die in the marketplace. Many more ideas die at the kitchen table where you're sharing it with someone you love or you trust or whatever. And they're like, oh, that sounds risky. Or no, that's already been done before. Or you've never done that before. How can you be successful at that? And the third one is exactly what Pat's talking about here. It gives you a false sense of accomplishment. It's like feeling like you've achieved the thing without even having started the thing. And I like that caveat. If you share it with someone who has higher status, or who you perceive as higher status, or someone whose opinion you really respect, it's going to mean a lot more, because you don't want to look silly in front of that person. You want their status to reflect back on you. The next part of this book that I thought was really powerful was to protect your progress. So Pat talks about distraction being everywhere. And often it's disguised as helpful advice. It's newsletters, it's ideas, it's YouTube channels, it's all of that sort of stuff. So again, he talks about really just gathering just the information that you need at a particular time and ignoring the rest. Just unsubscribe from everything. Don't have it in your feed. If you consume news and negativity and internet feuds and all of this sort of stuff, it's going to have a negative effect on your output, on the things that you create. So good creators are often good curators. So let me repeat that. Good creators are often good curators. So you need to curate your feed, your social media feed, your email feed, all of those sorts of things, because you want to protect your progress. You don't want things coming in there that are either irrelevant or a time suck or completely counterintuitive to the results that you want to get. Again, it's a simple idea, but it's a powerful idea. The best ideas tend to be the simplest ideas. When an idea is super complex, when you need some weird, crazy app to implement it or whatever, it generally tends to not get done. So it's self-imposed pressure. What are you going to pressure yourself to do, and putting yourself in those situations? The next thing that Pat talks about is whether you should persist or pivot. A lot of times people will pivot way too early. A lot of people say that, hey, I tried it, didn't work. And in reality, they tried once, twice, 3 times, and that was all. And of course, most things in life will never work on the first try, second try, or even third try. Sometimes you smash it out of the park and you get some success that was unexpected. But for the most part, you're going to be failing and getting better, and failing and getting better, and failing and getting better. In fact, failure is just information, right? So one of 2 good things can happen when you take action. Either you will learn, or either you will get better or progress towards your goal. So they're both good things that can happen. So Pat talks about the 3 Ps. He talks about progress. Am I improving? Passion. Am I still engaged? And purpose. Is this still aligned with my values? So if those things are still a yes, then keep pushing through. A lot of the advice that Pat talks about is just not giving up too early. So conduct some of those self-assessments, seek feedback from some of your champions and mentors, and really help you decide, is this time to pivot or not? So Pat talks about micro mastery and quantum leaps. So mastery is built on kind of focused, incremental improvements. So breaking skills down into small, manageable pieces. Again, nothing super mind-blowing. We all know that a lot of times that's one of the best ways to learn, is to really break things down piece at a time. And then he talks about quantum leaps. I found this particularly powerful in my own life. So sometimes I just need to get obsessed and absorbed by something, and that can really massively accelerate my progress. By just batching and going all in and just shutting everything out and making those big quantum leaps of progress can be really, really powerful, especially if you want to get progress in a short amount of time on a big project, something maybe that, feels huge. So use both. Use kind of those micro gains and then use those macro gains. The final section, which I really, really like, is go from learning to leading. So one of the best ways to really learn something well is to have to teach it to somebody. So teaching really reinforces your mastery, but also when you have to teach other beginners, you have to explain things simply. And to explain things simply, you really need to understand it well. Whenever somebody tries to be overly complex with their explanations and things like that, they don't really understand it themselves. So Pat talks a lot about that, and Pat's been an expert at building and nurturing communities. That he's been an online teacher for a very, very long time. Something that I really appreciate is just his ability to stay consistent, teach things in a very simple and understandable manner, And he's lived lean learning because I've seen his transformation from someone who was a podcaster, then a YouTuber, and now he decided, hey, I'm going to do a Pokemon YouTube channel. It's one of the biggest Pokemon YouTube channels. And he didn't know anything about Pokemon prior. So he's really lived that. He's not someone who just is teaching you something that he hasn't done. I've seen his progress over the years, and it's been truly inspirational. So really, the lean learning process is essentially 4 steps. And like I said, not going to be anything mind-blowing that you'd never think of, but they're simple, but they're powerful. So step 1 is identify. What do you want to accomplish next? Number 2, learn. And learn only what you need to move the needle forward. So just-in-time learning. 3, immediately act on what you've learned. I talked about inspiration being perishable. Really, really powerful. Immediately act on your inspiration. Do not try to learn every possible thing you can. So implement. 4, review and repeat. So refine, assess, reiterate, and then move to the next step. So like I said, nothing super mind-blowing there, but it's a common sense strategy that is not common sense practice. So with that, that's my review of lean learning. This book, really, really simply written. Pat's an expert at the craft. Absolutely a 5-star read for anyone who just wants to learn and implement something with a minimum viable process, with a minimum viable information, and just remove a lot of waste, a lot of procrastination, and just, stuff that is just stopping you from getting to where you want to go. So I love lean learning, 5-star read, highly recommend.